Ahoy there! I'm Captain Benzie and welcome to another ship fitting guide for EVE Echoes. In today's video we're going to be continuing our mini-series of looking at the Tech 7, Tech 8 mid-game battlecruisers by having a look at the Amarr Empire Prophecy. This ship is probably one of the most popular ships in the entirety of EVE Echoes. It is powerful, it's versatile, and it's available as low as Tech level 7, yet will carry you quite comfortably all the way up to and including Tech level 10 content. Of course, there are other variations we can have a look at beyond this as well, but for today's video we're going to be taking a look at the main Tech 7 Prophecy, and we're going to have a look at fitting it a little bit differently to usual. Now, if you are enjoying these videos, please let me know by hitting like on the video, subscribe to the channel for all things EVE Echoes if you haven't already, and if you do want to help support this channel and keep me doing what I'm doing, you can head across to Patreon, which is linked at the bottom of the screen and in the description down below. There you can pledge support for as little as £1 a month. It'll help keep this channel going, and you can earn some really cool exclusive merchandise and get your name in the end of each video. Anyway, with all that said and done then folks, let's jump right in to talking about the Amarr Empire's Prophecy. The Prophecy is very much the Amarr Empire equivalent of the Gallente Federation's Myrmidon, which we've already covered in this series. You can find more about the Gallente Federation Myrmidon by watching that particular video, so today we're going to jump into the Amarr Empire ship tree to the Battlecruiser branch and see the Prophecy. This is what we're going to be talking about today. Now, before we hone in on this particular version of the ship, I just want to talk about its progression, because if you enjoy the Prophecy at Tech level 7, once we hit Tech level 8, you unlock the Prophecy command, which allows you to use command burst modules in a much more effective way. Very useful if you're flying a lot in fleets and fancy being the command burst guy. Once we hit Tech level 9, we also unlock the Prophecy Guardian. This is one of the Armor Link Module Guardian ships, and again, I have done a Catskull Academy video on how Armor Guardians work, so do check that out if you're interested in learning how to tank for a fleet. Finally, up at Tech level 10, we then have the Prophecy 2 Command. Whilst this is an expensive ship, it is an incredibly popular choice for ratting at the upper echelons because it is a powerful ship, it's a versatile ship, and what it does remarkably safely. But again, that's another topic for another video. For today though, let's go back down and have a look at the Prophecy at Tech level 7. This is a rather unusual looking ship, I think it's fair to say. The Prophecy is often referred to as the Golden Space Turkey, and you can kind of see why. It definitely gets some really unique skins, which for some reason aren't loading for me here, so we won't talk about those today, and we'll go straight into the ship details, talking about how this actually flies. First of all, we have a fitting profile of 5 drone tubes, which can launch, of course, small or medium drones. We're probably going to go with medium drones because they have better DPS and their application is more than enough for what we're going to be using this for. We get 3 high slots, 3 mid slots, and 5 low slots. Now, the 3 high slots are not a primary way of dealing damage here for the Prophecy. These are just sort of side damage. The drones, of course, are going to be the primary way for you to deal damage against enemy ships, and so the high slots you can kind of play with and do with as you see fit. 3 mid slots is pretty good versatility for a Tech 7 ship. It's enough that we've got a couple of options as to what we want to fit, dependent on what we want to do. Whether we're going to go for capacitor warfare, or propulsion jamming, or things like that, we can switch those mid slots around with a good amount of versatility. 5 low slots at this tech level is also surprisingly solid. This really helps the Prophecy, both in terms of its tanking capabilities and in regards to things like weapon upgrades, which of course, drones don't really need all of that much extra in the low slots. The weapon upgrade module is pretty much the only thing you may consider there. Propulsion, due to the range bonus you can get from drones, isn't such a necessity on a ship like the Prophecy or the Myrmidon, but again, we can talk about that later. 3 of each rig types rounds this off as a standard battlecruiser. We then have a power grid output of 741 megawatts. Now, this is a bit bigger compared to the Myrmidon, and it actually gives us some surprising versatility that the Myrmidon didn't have. When I did the Myrmidon video, I pointed out you couldn't really oversize many of the modules. In fact, the only module I could really find to oversize was changing one of the high slots to a large rapid missile, which just didn't really do it for me. The Prophecy, however, we'll talk about this more in the fitting section, can overfit some modules due to that larger power grid. It's a cargo hold, though, of 800 cubic meters. That is slightly smaller than other battlecruisers at this level, which typically have 900 to 950, but again, is cargo hold really your main concern here? The defences are solid. 26,582 for the overall HP. Most of that, with this being an Amarr ship, is stacked into the armor tank. There's not all that much comparatively in shields. You can see it's less than 6,000, and it's only just over, well, okay, it's just under 7,000 for the structure. So structure is okay, shields are pathetic, but the armor tank is surprisingly large. That is where all of the chips are put down in regards to the prophecy and its tanking capabilities. You are going to be armor tanking this ship, whether you like it or not. Being an Amarr ship, it also has surprisingly strong capacitor banks, 2,689 gigajoules with a max capacitor recharge rate of 13.18 gigajoules per second. This is because Amarr ships typically use lasers. This means you actually have more capacitor than you probably need to worry too much about. We will be obviously taking that into consideration in the fitting later, but again, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Now, the signature radius and indeed the scan radius, when we see source radius, if you were to look at this, are both very large, 245.3 meters. This is not a small ship. It's easy to scan down. It's easy to lock onto. Its scan resolution of 186 is also pitiful. This is not fast at locking onto things. Other battlecruisers at this tech level are going to do much better than this one. Finally then, we have our agility ratings and flight velocity. 181 meters per second is not particularly far as the Battlecruiser is concerned, not particularly fast, sorry. The warp speed of 2.7 astronomical units per second is pretty much standard for a Tech 7 Battlecruiser, and its mass and inertia leave a little bit to be desired. This is quite a clunky Battlecruiser. It is going to take time to actually turn and align, and it's not overly fast at moving when it's facing in the direction that it actually wants to go. But again, these are all things that we can ignore in regards to fitting it. If we look at the trait description, being a battlecruiser, we have a roll bonus that is regarding range. In this case, it's a 15-kilometer flat increase to drone command range, which means if you've fully trained up your drone skills, you should find that you've got about a 45-kilometer drone command range here. Of course, you can boost that up further with other things as well, with other skills. You've also got the ability to fit command bursts, because of course, this is a battlecruiser. It's not one of the attack battlecruisers, therefore it can fit command bursts. For its skill bonuses, we have two: Advanced Medium Drone Upgrade and Battlecruiser Command. Now, Advanced Medium Drone Upgrade is going to increase our drone damage by 30%. At full level 5 of Advanced Medium Drone Upgrade, we will have 150% additional drone damage, which means those 5 drones are actually going to be acting much more like 12 or 13. We've also got a flight velocity bonus here, 5% increase to drone flight velocity, 25% at full training. This is really useful at helping medium drones stick to faster moving targets and apply their damage considerably better. This is why the prophecy is so popular, because if you happen to be jumped by someone in something like an interceptor or frigate, you can probably deal with them quite comfortably without worrying too much about things like webs and target painters if they're outside of the range of those. The drones are fast enough to actually keep pace with that kind of ship. Finally then, Battlecruiser Command gives us a 4% increase to armor resistance per level of training. That's obviously a full 20% at Battlecruiser Command level 5. This makes the prophecy surprisingly tanky, whereas the Myrmidon goes more towards its active tank by increasing the amount of armor that is repaired per cycle of its armor repairers. Here the prophecy goes for more of a prevention is better than cure approach, by essentially preventing the damage from even hitting it in the first place. Obviously that's just armor resistance, but your shields are going to vaporize in the first seconds of combat anyway, but once you hit the armor tank, this is a surprisingly sturdy ship. Anyway, let's take a look at fitting this thing. The prophecy is commonly fitted as a ranged sniper or kiting fit. This allows the prophecy to sit at a distance, deal its damage to targets from relative safety. Now, in order to achieve this, you tend to go for high slots that use things like missiles or strike cannons, maybe rifled railguns, something with a long range to it. Your low slots tend to be geared more around dealing damage and controlling your range, so drone damage amplifiers, drone navigation computers, and micro warp drives, and your mid slots tend to be things like target painters more than anything that's shorter range. Your rigs will also be things that look at the amount of damage you can deal or the range you can deal that damage from. Now, that is such a popular fit, it's covered plenty of places elsewhere. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it today, because I wanted to try something a little bit different. So behold a Prophecy Brawler. You all know that I love my brawling fits, I like to get up close and personal, so yes, this Prophecy is a Captain Benzie special. Now, in order to achieve this, I've gone for some pulse lasers. Pulse lasers have really good application, they have solid range for a short range module, and very high DPS. Yes, a lot of people say that lasers are brilliant against shield tanks, but not so great against armor. That's definitely true to a certain extent. It means if you're doing, say, Guristus or Angel anomalies, you're probably going to do better with this than you would in something like an Amarr or a Serpentis anomaly that uses armor tanking. That said, the damage it does to armor is still respectable, and frankly, whatever we do here doesn't overly matter. This is not where the primary damage of this fit comes from. As I've talked about recently with things like the Myrmidon, you could actually put medium torpedoes here as well. They've got similar range and similar damage output, so it's entirely up to you depending on what you've trained and what your kind of playstyle is. Do note, of course, that the torpedoes will also make you significantly more capacitor stable, which may change some of your rigs and mid slots around as well. Speaking of the mid slots, because we're going for a range of around 15 kilometers thanks to the pulse lasers there, our drones can comfortably deal with that. I've gone for 2 Vrikalakis medium energy Nosferatus. These have an optimal range of 12 kilometers, which is almost the same as the beam lasers. So if the beam lasers are in range, the Nosferatus are pretty close to being optimal, and vice versa. If you stay in optimal range of the Vrikalakis, then your beam lasers are going to be doing well. Now, it's worth noting that you can actually, with this power grid, if you're trained up high enough, fit in a single large up-ear large energy Nosferatu. That is an oversized module that will use up that excess power grid. This would then give you space to have 2 stasis webifiers, though it will require an ancillary power grid router in one of your rig slots. Now, the reason I've gone for 2 mediums rather than 1 large is that 1 large is not quite as good as energy transfer as 2 mediums. It is, however, longer range, which is worth bearing in mind. Now, see, I've only gone for 1 stasis webifier here. You'll find that medium drones, especially with the Prophecy's bonus to their flight speed, are actually very good at sticking to even the fastest ships in the game, and will do surprisingly well. That said, a stasis webifier just allows you to amplify the damage on that one particular target. Again, you might decide that this one you could swap out for something like a target painter instead, if you want to be able to deal damage at something that is over the 14.8 kilometers away, but for the most part, we're going to be in 14.8 kilometers because, well, that's basically where our beam lasers are as well, 15.75, and our Nosferatus there at 12 kilometers, so we're probably going to be orbiting around 12 kilometers of a target anyway, keeping it in web range, keeping it in beam range, keeping it in energy Nosferatu range. Now, the drones themselves can kind of be anything you fancy. I've mainly gone for Imperial Navy infiltrators because, well, they're Amarr ones on an Amarr ship. But of course, if you are going up against armor tanking stuff, you might decide that actually you prefer to use something like Valkyries here. Republic Fleet Valkyries are a very good option for punching through armor tanks. It's entirely up to you, and it bases more upon the content that you're doing than anything else. Because I'm going to be showcasing this in a Minmatar anomaly, an Angel anomaly. They are shield tanks. Infiltrators work surprisingly well for this. Now, for the low slots, I've gone for 2 Corpum C-type medium armor repairers. 2 medium armor repairers actually does more armor rep per second than 1 large armor repairer would do, and it does it for less power grid and less capacitor. These are really capacitor-friendly modules, and they work surprisingly well at keeping you alive. You'll see through most of the combat demonstration, I actually only have 1 of these running, but I fitted 2 just in case of emergencies or going into higher tier content. But you might find that actually you can, do with just the 1, at which point you could put something like a plate here to make yourself more tanky, or an extra drone damage amplifier, or even a drone navigation controller. It's entirely up to you, really. Play around with things and see how you feel. I've then gone for 2 C-type adaptive armor hardeners. Again, because this is an Angel anomaly, I'm going to be taking damage from explosive, kinetic, and thermal. If you're going up against Galente, or if you're going up against Amarr-based stuff, like railguns or lasers, because those only deal 2 damage types, you might want to swap one of these for a reactive armor hardener instead. It will give you a better overall result than an adaptive when you're only going up against 2 damage types. If you're going up against missiles or cannons, however, no, stick with 2 adaptive armor hardeners rather than the reactive. Now the final slot here is kind of up to you. This could be a battery if you really want to go capacitor stable. It could be a plate or something if you want to add a bit more survivability. Heck, it could even be a propulsion mod if you really feel the need for it. Personally, I don't feel the need for any of those, so I'm quite happy swapping this out for extra drone damage. As you can see, just having this fitted is going to give us a 5% increase to damage bonus, and a 4.3% reduction to its activation time. The activated version then will increase that by 8.6% damage, and a 400% boost to the activation time adjustment of -4.3. Of course, as I record this video, we're just coming up to the April balance patch. If you're watching this in the future, these numbers might be different because the drone damage amplifier is one of those modules that is getting changed in the balance patch, so we'll see how that works. Either way, the fit should still be fine, just you might find that this is better in passive than it is in active, but we'll see. For the rigs, I've gone for a standard DPS setup of a drone firepower augmenter and a drone speed augmenter. This is straight up DPS. It's more damage per shot and more shots. Straight up DPS rigging there, along with an auxiliary nano pump. This gives an additional 30% armor repair to those armor reppers. Now, you might decide that you actually prefer to go for something like an anti-explosive rig here to help patch the explosive hole, but I find that, again, if you're not going up against anything that's doing heavy explosives, so if you're not in Angel space, the nano pump is going to do better, and quite frankly, the nano pump actually does really well in Angel space as well, but just be aware, if you are in Angel space, you might find the anti-explosive is slightly better, but it depends on whether you want the variation or whether you want to just lean heavily into what you have. Now, for the engineering rigs, I've gone for a polycarbon engine housing, a semiconductor memory cell, and a capacitor control circuit. The capacitor control circuit and the semiconductor memory cell are, of course, there to help us with just keeping everything capacitor stable. With two Nosferatus, we're pretty good as it is, but of course, with lasers, yeah, you're using a lot of capacitor anyway. That's why you might decide to go for torpedoes if you're not heavily skilled into lasers. Torpedoes might be a better option for you, at which point this capacitor control circuit is probably not quite as vital as it could be. You might swap some of these rigs. You'll check and see how your capacitor balance is. Now, things with the polycarbon engine housing, this is very much a wildcard rig as well. I've done this because I want to be able to change between targets quite quickly in order to help keep my lasers in range. You could go for an auxiliary thruster, but they are dirt expensive right now, so I try to avoid using them where possible. But if you want to lean heavily into the prophecy, then yeah, auxiliary thrusters are probably a good option here. You could also go for a targeting computer as a way of just getting your scan resolution up so that you lock onto things that little bit quicker. It's really up to you what you go for in this particular slot. If you're using a propulsion mod, you might even go for a dynamic fuel valve if you feel particularly wild. Now, this fit is giving me 977.91 DPS. 749 of that comes from the drones cold, 228 is coming from the lasers, and those should be in range at pretty much all times. Therefore, we should be doing that full 977.91 at all times. Also, lasers have really good application, which means the difference between your actual DPS and your paper DPS is slim. It's almost going to be 100% as long as you're in optimal range, which is what I absolutely adore about lasers and why I think they are one of the most powerful weapon systems in EVE Echoes. Our defense is solid, 44,235 cold, that's before we turn the hardeners on. We are capacitor stable, and we are comfortably capacitor stable, which means if you did want to swap things around, you could swap one of the rigs for a ancillary power grid router, put in a large Nosferatu instead of the mediums, and then use that third mid slot for whatever. If you want to use something like an armoured command burst, you could get away with that. That's a way to free up a slot and not lose much in the way of capacitor stability. Targeting 245 meters, scan resolution of 242 is pathetic, really not very good, but hey, we're going to have to live with that, and we have a navigation there of 262.45. Even with all the bonuses, this is a very slow moving ship. Again, that is just something you're going to have to live with. That is part of what makes the prophecy, but let's look at this in action. As with all of these Battlecruiser videos, I'm showcasing this in a Tech 10 Angel small anomaly, just because this is a nice easy way to watch the videos side by side and see how they compare in the same kind of content. Now, the prophecy here will quite comfortably do medium, Tech 10 Angel medium anomalies. Again, if you're not in an Angel anomaly because of the whole armor tanking thing, you might actually be able to go even higher, possibly larges. I will also tell you, you can quite comfortably do Tech 7 and Tech Tech 6 special anomalies as well. So if you want to be going after Inquisitors and Scout anomalies, then absolutely you can do that in this ship if they're Tech 6 or Tech 7. I haven't tried Tech 8. You might be able to if you're high in skills and daring enough to try it. Now here you'll see as the 4th wave spawns, I have got both armor repair modules on at once. I'm a little bit out of range in regards to the Nosferatu, so I am losing capacitor faster than I would like. That of course can be rectified by using the large Nosferatu rather than mediums. In regards to the range, you'll see I am moving in on things. The drones of course will shoot off and hit well over the range of everything else. So if I'm out of range with my lasers and Nosferatus, the drones will still keep doing their damage, and you can see there, down goes that first ship. I'm now going after a Talwar 2 Assault. I've got a web on it. I've decided that I'm not taking enough damage to actually warrant both armor reps, so I'm going to switch those off and just help my capacitor recharge, especially since I am now actually closer to the optimal range of that capacitor. You can see there it's on the Gist Typhoon at 15-16 kilometers away. That's much closer to the optimal range of 12, so I'm getting close to the full transfer, and indeed my capacitor is now recharging. The power of those lasers is also really doing some heavy work on the ships as I get into range of them. That stabber is losing its shields quickly. You can see the drones are just sort of chipping away at it. Then you get a big shot of all 3 lasers on there. I will say as well, flying this reminds me how much sort of the sound of lasers, medium lasers, really disappoints me. They have such a terrible sound effect. That is something I hope NetEase one day do correct, and we get some nice hefty pew or something coming off those lasers, rather than the little sort of snappy crack. Like, that's the kind of sound I expect my cereal to make when I pour the milk on it, not high-power energy lasers burning through an enemy's shields. But hey, we'll see. Anyway, here we are now down onto the Gisty Hound. Obviously, it is a small ship. You can see the lasers do some hefty damage to it. The drones are quite happily chewing away through it as well. No resistance whatsoever. The web does help, but we're quite okay without it. And now onto the Tornado. It's interesting to see, actually, just how well this holds onto this. Like, I'm in 6 kilometers here. The lasers are quite happily targeting. I've got the nest worm on, so I just want to quickly open this up and take a look at the DPS. 1,174 is the heated DPS currently with that nest worm on, so you can see that. But yeah, we're holding our range quite nicely. We're taking very little damage from things. It looks a lot of damage because, of course, we're armor tanking. I still look at that and I go, oh my goodness, I've taken so much damage. No, I've just lost my shields because I'm armor tanking in an Amarr ship that has no shields. It's one of the things you kind of have to get used to. I'm trying to force myself to use more armor tank ships these days so that I actually get used to that, and I hear that screaming of shields and I don't panic as much. Watch when there comes a day when I'm flying a shield tank ship, it starts screaming at me and I'm like, oh, it's fine, we're just coming down to the armor, and then I panic as I remember that I'm actually shield tanking. We're quite comfortably chewing through this. This entire anomaly took about 20 minutes from start to finish, and because we're brawling, we can loot as we go as well. And that does mean if, for example, you go for that large energy Nosferatu in the mid slots with the upgrade, yeah, you could put a Webifier as your second slot. Your third slot could actually be an auto salvager if you've got the skills for it, and if that's something you think you might enjoy doing, just looting as you go. We're now finally up against the Typhoon 2, still one of my favourite ships in the game, quite comfortably pulling this thing down at speed. And I've also just remembered, during the fitting section, I didn't talk about the Nano Core. Now, obviously from the visuals, I've gone for the NCO Blood Raider Nano Core. I went for straight up drone damage. Ultimately, I wanted to showcase that this is just using any old Nano Core. I wanted it to be the Blood Raider one because I really like the look of it. I love how the Blood Raider ships look. I love that mottled, bloody kind of effect to it. So putting that onto the Prophecy was a no-brainer for me. But of course, if you're taking one of the Prophecy cores out of the Concord pass, you'll find they have better stats than the NCO core. Though, of course, you can get the NCO core either for the Blood Raider or for Sancha, or you could actually get the Imperial Navy NCO one as well, the Amarr Navy NCO, because straight out of the LP store, if you want that as your easier option of getting one of these, if it comes up in the store for you. All of those will be equivalent to what we've got here, and of course the Concord ones will actually be higher. I think it's only 16.8% damage from the Blood Raider NCO, whereas most nano cores these days are like 18.2, 18.8, somewhere around there. So it's entirely up to you how you go about that. I just love the way this one looks. Look at it, that sort of mottled, bloody effect. Beautiful. Anyway folks, that really does wrap it up for this particular video. The Prophecy is remarkably good at brawling, like as good as the Myrmidon. I completely forgot the name of the ship then. I would say it's as good as the Myrmidon. You can definitely snipe with it, you can definitely kite with it, you can definitely brawl with it. Surprisingly versatile ship. I can see why so many people like it. I just can't really get over the fact that it looks like a giant space turkey, and of course it's an Amarr ship, which I tend to have a minor aversion to anyway, unless I can cover up all of that ivory and gold bling that's on them. But hey, maybe you fly the Prophecy a lot more than I do, maybe you think I've missed something, you've got some cool ideas of how to fly this ship that I haven't mentioned in this video. Let me know in the comment section down below. Remember, every comment you put onto my videos does help the channel out, and it also enters you into the chance to win a month of Combo Omega, so make sure you are joining the conversation both in the comment section down below and on my Discord. 2 further opportunities to win a month of Combo Omega every week on Discord as well. Anyway folks, that about wraps things up for this particular one. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. Thank you for watching this one right the way to the end. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!